All right, so you should be Matthew. This is Victoria Costantino, and she is the Alamo Dome Public Safety, Parking, and Special Projects Manager at the City of San Antonio. We thank you for coming and talking to us today. So without further ado.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you, Matthew. Well, I was just going to start. We are in the middle of a boxing load-in. We have Showtime pay-per-view coming up on Saturday, which is the largest boxing and one of the largest live entertainment events that's happening in the country right now outside of some open-aired NFL stadiums. So I would love to say that I got to update my PowerPoint and it is spot on, but I just deleted the first half because it talked way too much about myself. And I'm just going to go over kind of my journey. And then I have some tips for those of you or those of us who are trying to sort of enter into the career path of sports management. So as Dylan mentioned, my current title is Public Safety and Parking and Special Projects Manager here at the Alamo Dome in San Antonio, Texas. We are a city-owned and operated venue. And so we fall under public government, and that changes our operations a little bit. But my career kind of took a crazy journey. It wasn't a standard journey. So I actually started off as a high school theater teacher. I loved theater. I always wanted to be a teacher, and I was very set in my ways. Like I was going to be a theater teacher, and I thought it was going to be the most awesome thing ever. And then I became a high school teacher, and I was like, what did I do? This was a terrible decision. Why did I go back to high school? I did it once. But my plan had always been to sort of, manage this theater program at the high school level for 5 years. I'm very type A. And then after 5 years, I was going to go into the professional sector. So I cut that vision a little short. I went back to grad school. I went to Syracuse in New York, and actually obtained an entertainment administration master's degree and came back into the theater world in the performing arts center setting. So I worked in downtown San Antonio at our historic theaters here, overseeing all of the front of house, all of security, and any sort of service provision to the public. Now that was a 2,200 seat venue. So on the smaller end, and I loved it. It was awesome. But I was only getting paid about $28,000, which was actually less than I made as an educator. And so I was like, man, I went and got this master's degree. I'm doing something I love, but I'm not getting paid anything to do it. So that's when I kind of realized, okay, it's not just about fulfillment, right? I need to find something that I can be fulfilled in, but also get paid an appropriate amount. So as anyone in my situation would do, I was like, hey, I'll just try an NFL stadium and I'll just apply for it and see what happens. And so, yeah, I applied with the Superdome in New Orleans, and I got the job. It was crazy. It was a crazy journey. Moved to New Orleans in a matter of weeks, and came on their staff, and I was the lead trainer there at the Superdome. We had really 4 venues. We had the Superdome, which is like 70,000+ seats, the arena there, which has about 19,000. We had an outdoor amphitheater space, which held 9,000 to 10,000. And then we also staffed our Tulane University partners stadium as well. So that was a huge job. I was specifically on the management team for guest services, but I was a lead trainer. So I worked with parking, public safety, housekeeping, security, and guest services, as well as engineering, event services, and some of these other ancillary departments. So I was like, yes, I'm on this path. I'm having a ton of fun. I'm getting paid appropriately. I was making about $50,000 in that job, and I was at an assistant manager level. But I realized, man, I'm kind of working a lot, and I started tracking my hours, right? So a standard work week for me in my previous job would have been about 60 hours a week. And that's pretty average for me. I can do 60 hours and be fine. And that's still a job and a half for a lot of people, right? So at the Superdome, I started tracking my hours, and I was on average working 90 hours a week. And I kind of like had this revelation, like, man, I am literally working two people's jobs hourly wise. And I just wasn't sleeping at all. And it was just like, okay, I'm still missing something in this like golden nugget job, right? So it wasn't just fulfillment. It wasn't just pay. It was also time. I needed something where I could figure out my time. And so, at that point, I just actually proposed a plan for, how we could manage our staff a little bit differently, our schedules, and they worked with me on that. And I was able to reduce that down to about 60, which made that part worth it. But alongside, there was all these workplace culture issues. So there was a lot of harassment. There were racism issues. There were sexual harassment issues. There were all these issues in the workplace that aren't necessarily stereotypical for sports management, but they just happen to exist. And at the same time, there was all of this stuff coming out about the Dallas Mavericks stadium. And it was just sort of this thing like, okay, the meat of what holds together a really amazing job is workplace culture. And so that's kind of how I developed how I look for a job now, right? So I look for something I can feel fulfilled in, something that pays well, something that I can manage my time in, knowing that no matter what job interview you go to in a sports management world, they're going to ask you about how many hours you're comfortable working. So you have to be able to navigate that. But most importantly is workplace culture. I want to be in an environment where I feel welcomed, where I can lead and also be led, and everybody's sort of moving on the same page. And so after that, I sort of ended up here with the city of San Antonio, and I'll give props to it right up front. The city has a core value system, and that's how they sort of moderate everything that we do, whether it's your performance evaluations, whether it's behavioral assessments, and even just working together. And our stadium has a motto that we call One Team. And that's really important. And that's what I want to share with you guys, because if you were to enter a stadium or team setting, a lot of times it's not one team. It's this department and this department. And if something goes wrong, it wasn't my department, it was your department. I'm not moving a barricade. That's not my job. And it gets kind of contentious, and it doesn't help anybody succeed. And in our stadium, we really work to push that aside, and we sort of X out that mentality at any time possible. And that's hard to find. So whenever you get to those interview stages, make sure that you guys bring those items up. So that's a little bit about me. I see we have some other people joining us. Welcome, you guys. And I am going to attempt to share the rest of my PowerPoint with you real quick. So we'll do screen number 2. Let me know if you guys can see my PowerPoint.
It's on there.
Can you see it?
Yeah, it should be.
Okay, awesome. So these are just some tips of things that I wish I had known in advance before I started applying for jobs or before I even entered into this industry. And I hope that they are helpful for you. You might know half of them, but it might just help to hear it from somebody else too. Number 1, have a plan for your future, but always remain flexible. It's great to have goals. It's great to set a path, but we have to understand that our journeys are never a straight line. And that is something that I did not know in college. I was very type A. I was very much like, I'm doing this for an X amount of time, yada, yada, yada. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have kids. And then I'm going to do this job. And obviously none of that worked out. So, and it's all for the best. And I'm exactly where I need to be. So I highly encourage you guys, be flexible. Look for those avenues that can change your direction and be better than what you initially accepted or expected. We will all be rejected. So when your time comes to be, just accept it, know that it happens to everybody, and then move past it. Don't allow yourself to sit and wallow in any sort of rejection or inability to get a job or an internship. I highly recommend you guys look for silver linings, anything you can find to learn from. And, there might not be something that you can find as a silver lining on every situation, but look for them and always ask yourself, what is the next step to take if you hit a roadblock? The second point I'd like to make is I hope you guys create a meaningful resume. A lot of times we don't take the time to do this in advance. We get a job interview. We're like, oh man, I need to update my resume stat. So take time to do that now and understand that you're going to craft it to whatever job that you're trying to apply for. So craft it now, edit it for your job, save it as a different copy, and make sure it's one page. Use some color. It's okay to use some color now. There are very modern resume formats available on canva.com. It's pretty user friendly. This is my resume to give you an example. And it's pretty bold, but I'm pretty bold. So I feel like this gives insight into, hey, I can work a little bit of tech. These are all the things that I do. On the left, I talk about my areas of focus and key points, my experience. I also include some soft skills in there about my personality. And coming back to this page, I highly recommend cutting out your objective. I know, and these are just my recommendations, right? So you might hear differently from some of your professors, and that's totally great and fine. But my recommendation is to cut out the objective. If you're applying for that job, hopefully they know why you're applying, and focus more on explaining who you are and how you'll benefit the team. So on my resume, I include my management philosophy instead of an objective. The third point is develop your LinkedIn. Take time to work on your LinkedIn. A lot of hiring managers are looking at your profiles because your Facebooks are private, so they want to see what they can figure out on your LinkedIn. Make sure you put detail in your job descriptions. You're not just putting, your experience. And if you haven't had an actual job where you're getting paid, use your internships, use your volunteer opportunities, use maybe whenever you've been a lead on a project in class. You can think outside the box on these listings. You can also add skills at the bottom of your LinkedIn, and you can ask for your colleagues and friends to recommend you and also support some of those skills, or they can write actually a paragraph recommendation. And I definitely recommend for you to send your professors and your bosses and your colleagues requests for those recommendations. And over the years, you'll want to update them and make sure that you're continuing to get new recommendations. Make sure you have photos of your projects on there, whether it's writing samples or visual, even if it's you at your specific sporting event or graphics that you're making, social media things that you're making, all of those things you can add in there. And you can also select to alert your network of updates. So if you get a new job, you can select to alert your network, or you can hide it. And the last important part is, especially right now, ever since COVID hit, they have an open to work option where once you start looking for jobs, you can select open to work and it'll put a profile tag on your LinkedIn. You can also select let recruiters know, even if you're in a job at present, and only recruiters will be able to see that you're open to applications. 4, find experience and take action. So, this is even more so the case now that COVID has occurred. It is super competitive. It's very hard to get jobs right now. And I don't want to discourage you in saying that, but it just is to encourage you to take these steps seriously, right? You've got to advocate for yourself and find opportunities, even if that's volunteering in your area of expertise. If that's volunteering at an organization, you've got to find opportunities. You also have to understand the landscape that you are trying to apply in. So keep an eye on companies' job boards, see what positions they have open, watch the turnover over the years, and keep those companies and those job platforms bookmarked so you can check them every now and then and just feel it out, see what's going on. If you find a company that you think you're interested in and you notice the same job opening up over and over and over again, and there's high turnover, it's probably an indication that there's a culture issue there. So just keep an eye out for things like that. Internships do not have to be unpaid. We've kind of grown up in this mentality where you have to earn your stripes and slave away at your internship, but there are a lot of internships out there that are paid. Of course, right now it's going to be harder to find them. So sometimes you will have to do things unpaid, and it might be boring, right? So I won't use not to name names, but there's an individual that I know who is younger who maybe had an opportunity to do an internship, and it was like, oh, it's boring, I'm going to do that. I do that all the time anyway. Well, sometimes you've got to earn your stripes, right? You've got to get that obligatory experience. So don't necessarily turn it down right away just because it might not be that exciting, because it's one more thing you can put on your resume. Here are some internship options for you guys, some opportunities. These are some nearby sports organizations that I highly recommend you keep an eye on. San Antonio Sports is located here in the Alamo Dome, and they have a lot of volunteer opportunities. They also take interns as well. San Antonio Spurs Sports and Entertainment. So those are Spurs and the AT&T Center. They do have paid internships, but they sort of operate kind of off the school schedule. So they're not necessarily in the summer, but they're good opportunities for you after you graduate if you happen to be in a living situation where you can take on an internship. The Valero Alamo Bowl takes on interns, and they typically take them on towards the end of the year, like right around now, because their event is typically in late December, early January. The San Antonio Missions, which is the baseball club here, different universities around the area. Of course, you guys are kind of far from the inner city here, but thinking after post-graduation and things like that, where you can be a little bit flexible, or if you're a younger classman, over the summers, look at universities. And the HEB Center at Cedar Park is also kind of nearby in the Cedar Park, Austin area. They might have some opportunities as well. Major job application platforms. We've got Teamwork Online. I'm sure you've heard of that. Keep your eye on that. They also post internships and jobs. They offer sort of like a premier platform that you have to pay for. You don't need to pay for that. I'm sure it will tell you, how many applicants you're going up against and some of those finer details. But at the end of the day, it's not necessarily going to shoot your resume, super high up above anybody else's. So if you're tight on money and you don't want to, put money towards that, that's totally fine. ASM Global. So ASM Global was a merger between SMG and AEG, and two of the largest stadium management companies in the world. And they merged, I think, last year, the year before. So this is their new platform. Live Nation, of course, everybody knows Live Nation. Live Nation has been rated one of the top companies to work for many years in a row. They have great benefits, great perks, and I highly recommend keeping an eye on that. They have a headquarters in Austin, so they have some nearby opportunities as well. And then team websites and venue websites. If any of y'all are interested in sports management in the venue world or the team world, look at them individually, because they will post on Teamwork Online, but they also have their own platforms sometimes. And sometimes it's just a redirect, right? So keep an eye on those. And then, of course, think outside the box. You've got live entertainment venues that are not in the sports world, such as coliseums, event centers, theaters, museums. DMC, destination management companies, with event planners and cultural centers. Sometimes, guys, it's just about getting your foot in the door and getting that first opportunity that will lead you, down the road where you're really looking for. This is an example of, on the right, of a mixer that the San Antonio Missions does, and a lot of other stadiums and teams do this, and they'll have it listed on Teamwork Online. But the Mission sends theirs out through through an email listserv, but I wanted to give you guys this contact at the bottom. This is an old one. I haven't done one recently, but that's a great contact for missions if you want to try to get your foot in the door there, meet some people there. And on the left, there's a QR code for the City of San Antonio's Ambassador Internship Program. They are paid, and the amount of those has changed since COVID has come into play, but good things to keep an eye on for the future. My fifth tip is networking with intention. This is really the key point. If you don't take anything else away from me, take this. You've got to do the work yourself. No one is going to find you. No one is going to say, where's a college grad that I can hire that I know nothing about? You guys have got to do the legwork yourself. Search for people in the job or job types or the company. You can do that on LinkedIn that you're interested in and reach out to them directly. Don't be afraid to make that connection. Don't be afraid to invite them to a now socially distanced coffee date. Not date, but coffee meetup or lunch. And, you know, if you have the ability to offer to pay for it, do it. Most likely they'll say, don't worry about it. But take the time to try to get to know these people. Even if it's a phone call, learn everything you can about how they got to their position, right? What steps can you take? What kind of certificates do they have? Did they even go to college? You know, learn these things to see where your path could lead if that's the type of job that you're interested in. And once you make that connection, find a way to circle back to those people 4 to 6 months later. You want your name to stay in the back of their minds. So even if it's a LinkedIn update that it's, or Facebook, that it's somebody's birthday, right? Hey, happy birthday. Or hey, I saw you got a job promotion. Congrats. It's going to keep that line of communication open. Prepare and search for job interviews. We talked about this a little bit. Keep your eye on the job boards and practice for your interviews. Ask a colleague to help you practice for an interview and ask them to be tough. You know, ask a professor, ask your parent, make them really grill you. Highly recommend looking up hard interview questions online and just see who would answer them. They're not always going to be what are your strengths and weaknesses, and you don't want to be caught off guard. In your interviews, make sure you don't lie, but that doesn't mean you have to be too honest. And what I is, let's say, you know, let's go back to the strength and weaknesses question. You don't want to tell them, oh, my weakness is I just can't work with anybody, you know, or I really don't do well with time management, or maybe I don't know Excel at all. You don't want to be that blunt, right? So you want to find a way to answer the question, but land it softly with a hint of how you're trying to improve. So I don't know Excel. I have moderate technology skills and am open to taking training and learning more. You know, just find a way to reword whatever those rough points are. And we all have rough points. So find your weakest points and find a way to soften them. Dress well in the interviews, guys. I can't tell you how many times I've had interviews and people come in t-shirts and jeans. Do not interview in t-shirts and jeans. And don't make stuff up. I had a guy recently last year tell me he was Jay-Z's bodyguard for his hand modeling company, White Chocolate. You know, all of this stuff can be looked up online. None of it's real. So don't try to be impressive. Breathe and relax. Everybody you're interviewing with, they're just people. And make sure to give a firm handshake. They are very similar. You know, you can, maybe now with COVID, you want to do a solid fist bump, but no weak handshakes if you go in for the handshake. Send a follow-up for those interviews, you know, whether it's a handwritten follow-up letter. Sometimes that takes too long, especially now we've got some postal issues. Definitely send an email thank you. Don't call. Some people call the hiring manager over and over. Don't do that. And don't send any sort of bribes to the workplace. Okay, this is a big one, negotiation. So sometimes when you get the offer and the negotiation is starting, right? And your salary comes back. My recommendation, I tell everyone, and my practice for myself is no matter what the amount or salary level comes back at, I'm going to negotiate. And that is because I want to communicate to my hiring manager that I'm valued and I understand my value, and I am going to advocate for myself to get the best that I can. And so sometimes that's negotiating your time. Sometimes you can wiggle on the paid time off, or how that's worked into your starting, because sometimes you don't get leave for 6 months or something like that. So you can negotiate that. You can negotiate the actual salary amount itself. To do that, I recommend looking up similar positions and the same exact position. Sometimes you can find that with your company on Glassdoor.com. You can sign up on Glassdoor for free and look up those salary comparables. And you can also look up cost of living. So you want to look at what those jobs are paying in the area and location that you are applying in. And that's what you can use to develop your response for negotiations. You can talk about your transportation expenses. You can ask for cell-phone stipends. There are a lot of things that you can work into in your negotiation while also still being professional and not offensive on the price. You don't want to go super high on your price, especially if you're young in your career, but there's nothing wrong with advocating for yourself. Number 8, don't get pigeonholed. So as you're developing your career, try not to get pigeonholed in one area. Try to learn as many different things as you can, as many different skills. And the reason that I say that is, we can think about the recessions that have hit, right? In our recent U.S. history, we've had some recessions, we've had some layoffs, we've had some furloughs, we've had people having to expand their careers and look for new avenues. The more skills that you can develop over time, the more likely you're going to be able, and quickly you're going to be able to land on your feet with something new. It will also help your ability to be promoted within your organization. And as we all age and grow and technology changes, we need to definitely try to keep up on the learning curve and learn those skill sets as we age, so that we don't get into an ageism situation down the line. Even though that is technically illegal, there are a lot of those situations happening, especially right now with the ability for people to kind of use the furloughs and everything to their benefit. So just keep that in mind. Take those classes, take those free trainings at your workplace if they offer them. Number 9, once again, figure out your company culture. I can't hit on this enough. You need to figure out, what do you want? Is the diversity in the workplace important to you? Try to find that out in advance. Typically, workplaces with larger diversity has a lot more people in it. You're going to have more cultures. You're going to have more ideas, more mindsets, more perspectives. For myself, I love being in a workplace that has diversity. And I try to, since I'm a hiring manager myself, I have about 50 people on my staff. I try to keep diversity at the forefront of my hiring goals as well, in regards to ethnicity and gender, and even work history, as well as military history. What do you want to look for in the benefits that your company offers? I recommend to you guys, and this might be new, whenever you get a job offer, ask them what the benefits package is up front. They should be able to provide that to you, so you get a more well-rounded understanding of how much is going to come out of your salary each month, and how much take-home you'll have for your check, as well as the coverages that you'll be able to obtain for you and any dependents that you might have. And what type of leadership style are you looking for from your supervisor? If you're a very direct person, have that conversation with them. Say, hey, this is my communication style. I want to work with somebody who I know works well with that. Hey, this is my living situation. For me, I have a house in Austin. I work in San Antonio. I commute half the week. And my lifestyle is very non-traditional. And so that was a conversation I had up front with my hiring manager. And they had no surprises when I came into this position, and it's worked out very well. You can look at culture comments on the company reviews on Glassdoor and Indeed. There's a sample on the right side of this screen. And you can look at the comments in there as well. Ask connections. If you have any connections on your LinkedIn for people that work at this company that you're looking at, ask them questions. Ask them their recommendations on different departments, where they hear people are the most happy at, if they have any red flags. And I don't necessarily mean super high managers asking them those questions, right? But if you have any employees maybe at the level that you're trying to get in at or below, definitely reach out. Trust your gut, you guys. When you go to an interview and something feels off, trust your gut. It's there to give you a heads up, right? So trust it. Take advantage of any of those opportunities that you can find, and always try to use your own management philosophy as your guiding principle whenever you are looking for jobs and when you start your jobs. And if you haven't developed a management philosophy yet, highly recommend that you work with someone to help you develop that. And lastly, number 10, so I can take a breath, is seek and prepare to climb. So once again, guys, it's your responsibility to advocate for yourself. It's no one else's responsibility. It's not your school counselor. It's not your professor. If they support you, that's 100% fantastic, and they are great people for doing that. But it's your responsibility to take the lead. Remember, have your boots strapped on and be ready to take on whatever comes your way. Right now is a tricky, in society, we're all having to navigate. Don't be afraid to take risks in your job search. As you climb, make sure to support those that follow you, lift them up, prepare people that you oversee when you get to a management role, prepare them for succession, help them gain those skills, prepare others as well. Think about all the help that you've gained over your time and even through your college experience, to where you can offer that to your siblings, your friends, maybe colleagues down the line. Once again, plan for succession and keep in contact with everyone in your network, all of your professors, all of those awesome people. And that is what I have as far as my presentation. So I was just going to take any questions. I see we have some other guests. If you have any specific questions about my facility, and how we're structured, any of the positions that we have, maybe thoughts and questions about where you might fit into this industry here, or just in general, I'm open.
Okay, I'll ask a question.
And I have the chat up as well if anybody wants to send me a chat.
What would you say is would you say it's important to have good training when you go into your let's say your first job, you don't know really what to expect? How important is the training process, and what does that process look like in a good culture?
I think in any good workplace, your direct supervisor is going to give you hands-on training and a side-by-side, or at least connect you with somebody to shadow. But there's very, I would say there are a few opportunities where you're going to know upfront what your training process is going to look like. You can always ask, but you're probably just going to be told, oh, we have great training and you'll be taken care of, right? So while that happens, you have to get comfortable asking questions. There is unfortunately a stereotype with millennials, right? That I'm a millennial too, by the way, I'll just own it, even though I don't claim it. But there's a stereotype that there's an inability for intrinsic action, okay? Meaning there is a lack of millennials taking on tasks without being directed. Millennials have to be told exactly what to do, very task oriented. So you guys have to fight that stereotype. You have to ask your boss questions. If you don't know something, it's not a good idea to just make a decision without all the information. So some of that training responsibility falls on you.
Victoria, thank you so much for your presentation. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Okay. Could you expand on your master's degree and the experience and the classes that you took and how that helped you in your job now or any other jobs that you've had post-master's degree?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I did my undergrad, I never planned to go for a master's. I thought, I don't need this, I'll just get hands-on experience and that will be enough to be able to get a job that I want. Of course, my bachelor's was a blended production, a live entertainment production and education degree. So when I started applying for these jobs at venues, I was getting 0 interviews, nothing. And that's just because the translation of responsibility was not necessarily seen by the hiring managers. So I thought, well, I guess I'll go get my master's. So in starting that process, for anybody who's interested, I actually started to reach out to the program directors at universities that had the master's program that I was interested in. And for me, that was arts and live entertainment management, which is only offered at maybe 8 universities across the country. And it has actually, they stopped offering that degree at my university. So since then, but I was reaching out to those directors and saying, hey, tell me about your program. This is what I want to do with my career. And I picked Syracuse because of that information that I gained from the program director. So if you're interested in a master's degree, whether it's sports management or business management, I highly recommend reaching out to program directors to see maybe where the best fit is for you. For me, in my degree, we were basically an MBA with which business admin blended with public administration and MPA. So it was typically your business administration minus all of the supply chain information, and we added in nonprofit administration. So in the entertainment industry, that was really beneficial because there are a lot of venues that are nonprofit run, and there are a lot of venues that are government run, and there are a lot of venues that are privately run. So we kind of got the scope and insight and leadership explanation from those different viewpoints. We also took managerial accounting, which was my least favorite class, coming from an arts degree, but very, very influential, of course, in a business degree. You're going to have those accounting classes. We took entrepreneurship classes, which were really interesting. They helped us with strategic planning, right? That's really helped with change management for me as I lead departments and think, okay, I need to get from point A to point B. What's my strategy and how can I develop a plan to get there? My education classes that I took in my undergrad have probably served me more than almost any other education classes that I had, even in my master's, because they focused on behavior management and learning styles. And so if there's an opportunity for any of you to take some education electives, even if you're in a business admin class, I highly recommend it. You guys are going to end up leading and working with personalities from every corner of the universe, and you have to be able to work alongside them and work together to develop and accomplish whatever you're going to do. So once I achieved my master's, it was interesting because I finished my coursework, but then we have our thesis. So I got to come back and get a job without having my degree yet. So I came back, I started my management at the Performing Arts Center without my degree, and I earned my degree while there. Whenever that happened, I was able to then negotiate, right? Because I had this new skill or this new platform. And so I did. I scheduled a meeting with our GM. I asked for a raise. I had over that course of that year kept track of all the projects and small goals that I had developed. And at that point, I was able to present them for a raise and also a request to gain skills. And what I asked for at that point in time was I wanted to work in the settlements after the events. Only executives get to do the settlements. So I was like, I want to do settlements. So my master's then at that point, definitely it was key to helping me get my position with the Saints and Pelicans at the Superdome. That has a lot to do with the technology skills that you gain, just staying in classes and looking at those things, and just overall budgeting and everything like that. Yep.
I think
That's great. Thanks.
I do see a question from Andrew. How did your experience with the Saints and Pelicans help with you in any way with the job that you have now? Okay, great question. So when I was with the Superdome, I oversaw, like I said, guest services, and I trained all of the departments. So I indirectly managed over 3,000 people. And one of those areas was public safety. So I did directly train public safety. Now at the Superdome, all of our staff were in-house. So they were our employees, and then we would only supplement with contractors as needed. So for an NFL game, you're looking at 500 to 600 people working in 3 to 4 departments, if not more, a game. So with that position, before an NFL game, we would get everybody in the same room. We would do a pre-event briefing. I would get up and I would provide a 5-minute training over anything we needed to work on for the game. I had developed a mystery shopper program for NFL games. I had people come in, train with our staff incognito, so they knew everything our staff was trained on, and then they would go to the games and see how our staff was performing. They would ask guest services questions. They would try to get into unauthorized areas. They would order from the concession stands. And so I would get that feedback and then use it to train our staff at the beginning of the next game to try to correct those problems. So building those reports and everything, and I just use SurveyMonkey. It's easy to do, but a lot of people don't know these tools, right? So if you start on your back end honing these tools that are free, you can provide this new experience in some of these situations where they've never even thought about implementing something like that, or they've tried and it just hasn't been successful. But so I had always worked sort of on, since I've been in venue management, operations or customer experience. Coming here, I was coming from the job I had between the Dome, the Superdome, and the Alamo Dome, where I was a general manager of a district downtown here in San Antonio that has 8 venues. So my job with the Saints, because I had overseen so many different departments and I didn't allow myself to just get pigeonholed into guest services, I was able to use that to bridge the gap to a general manager position of an entire district. And it was directly relevant. Seems totally off the beaten path, but we did have 8 venues there. Now, I will say, when I got that general manager job, we were having the men's Final Four here in San Antonio a few years ago. And there was roundtable, FBI, police, security training citywide at our emergency operations command for event staff to prepare the city as a whole. I was not initially invited to that, even though my property bordered the men's Final Four footprint. And we had constituents from men's Final Four. I had all of the Hall of Famers dinners on my property. ESPN was broadcasting off my property. And so because I just decided to reach out and network, I invited myself basically to this downtown FBI training. While I was there, I ended up at the same table as the general manager for the Alamo Dome. And that was 3 years ago. And after that point, I reached out to him, connected with him on LinkedIn, reached out to him every time I saw something on my LinkedIn pop up. Maybe he liked an article somebody posted. I would comment on it. He got promoted. I sent him an email. That led to me getting this job indirectly. You just have to, it's like calculated networking. So it's all been beneficial. All right, I see a second question. What does a typical day at your job look like on game day? Awesome question. So game day for me right now, pre-COVID, so what I oversee here, I oversee police, event police, K9, overnight police, fire department, EMS, event security, which is our peer or t-shirt security, that are our contractors, dome security, that's building security, perimeter security, and transportation. So I work with our traffic. They shut the streets down, prepare for that. VIA, which is our bus system here, they have a transit station directly connected to the Alamo Dome, so we work with them. And parking. We have 3 on-site parking lots and 4 off-site parking lots for over 2,000 parking spaces. So that's everything I oversee. Pre-COVID, I had a supervisor that directly took care of parking. He kind of just took care of business. So on game day, I was in-house. My focus was security. My focus was checking. I work with our Fusion Center, which is the FBI Joint Task Force Center, on any terror attacks, any social media threats, anything like that that will come up. So we check pre-game, want to make sure there's nothing on cue that mentions our facility there. I oversee, I would come in, let's say 10 o'clock, even if the game was 7 p.m., I would come in, I would check in with my team, my building team, and then it's just like fires, like what's in the loading dock, what's coming in, is it approved? We have contractor check-in up here where all the vendors and all the workers come and they check in, monitoring that. And I didn't have to do anything really before 10. Now that COVID has occurred, our venue staff has been cut from 75 to less than 40. And so my parking supervisor has been reassigned by the city to another department. So now I come in at 5:30 on a game day. Our first parking lot opens at 8. So I come in at 5:30, make sure all my ducks are in a row. My lead parking supervisor and our openers come in at 6:30. I brief them with anything that's come up. For us, we have UTSA. So any items UTSA have, if they have media passes, credential passes, VIPs, let's say Spurs players come to the game, give them all that information. They go out and they set up the parking lots, the tents, unlock the lots, make sure there's no tailgating at present, and get that started. Get with my security team, see if anything happened overnight, because I have 24-hour building security. Check in with my first shift to see if third shift passed anything forward. Want to make sure we've got our bus plan on the list. So our event manager develops what we call our event prospectus. Our prospectus for this weekend is 13 pages long. So it looks like this. We've got a timeline here of all the load-in days, all the times, what's coming when. And so I'll check the timeline, and I'll also check my department sections. Just to make sure, we got our loading dock information up to date. I know when the buses are getting here. I don't want the teams waiting. That's a high priority. Then I'm going to do a building perimeter check, make sure all of the perimeter and barricade is set up appropriately. Those are all set up by another department. They're set up by operations team. But at the end of the day, if somebody breaches that barricade, it's my team's responsibility to fix it. So exterior perimeter check. And then at a certain point, when everything starts to kind of move, we open what we call event command. Every major stadium has an event command. It's like a box in the sky, and you don't really know where it is, but it's typically somewhere around the press box. And you're going to have a representative from every department at that location, and they're the ones that are dispatching all the calls. So if you get a call into event command that there's a wet spill in section 101, housekeeping is going to dispatch it out. So I oversee that, make sure that's set up. All of our cameras and perimeters are set up. Cameras and surveillance are set up. All of my team has all of the staff notes. Their binders are prepped. And then other than that, it's just whatever comes up during the day. You can never know what all is going to happen. It's just not possible. There's always deliveries. There's always the client, forgot to give passes for so-and-so. There's the people that call the GM and they want sweet tickets, and it's sure, go ahead. Hey, Victoria, let him through the loading dock, find him a seat, you know, so there's just, it's a lot of random stuff. But last Saturday, we had pushed the game time back, and I said, hey, early team, take care of it. I came in around 10 on Saturday, and I worked until 4 a.m. on Monday. So that's my typical Saturday. So it's a lot of time. All right. Well, we are almost at an hour. I just want to thank you guys again. Dylan, you guys have my contact information. So and I'm going to send a follow-up. I'm working on a video to give you guys a virtual tour of our stadium and a couple of interviews with different department representatives. And if y'all have any questions about the departments here, I know it's hard to know what job opportunities are there when you haven't necessarily been integrated. So just send me an email and I'll definitely get back to you.
Thank you so much, Victoria. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Y'all have a wonderful day.
You as well. Thanks.
So I can just stop recording this, right, Dr. Mack? Oh, okay.